Hey, everybody. Welcome to another end of a season of Star Trek. We made it to the end of the third season of Star Trek Voyager. Clay, how are you?
Good. We finally listen. This might be the best season of Star Trek Voyager because, man, I felt like I was right there on that 75-year journey the whole time.
It's the most, it captures the theme of the season so well compared to all the other
most of that trip is going to be boring and kind of uneventful and disappointing. So maybe it was actually the best season.
We should have done we should have thought about this a little bit more and had like a special guest star that represents like the Kazon, and then we just abandon them and we never talk to them again on the podcast. You know,
Yes.
they just join us for a little bit of Voyager's time. That might have been a fun idea actually to do that. Yeah, we're here to talk about Scorpion. So buckle up, everybody.
Get over here, guys.
Get over here. This is the 26th and final episode of the third season of Star Trek Voyager. It came out on May 21st, 1997. It is one of two in the Scorpion arc. The next one is going to be two of two in the Scorpion arc. Written by the magical duo of Brannon, Braga, and Joe Menosky. Directed by David Livingston. In universe date 50984.3, which is 2373 and 2374. Interesting. Is there a time jump in this? No.
I don't think
it's just
so.
the new year. They're just celebrating the new year, I guess, while this is happening.
Yeah.
In this episode called Scorpion, upon entering Borg space, Voyager encounters an alien race even more powerful than the Borg and hell-bent for leather, bent on destroying all life in the galaxy, leading Captain Janeway to enter an alliance with the Borg in order to defeat them. Season finale. So, here we are. It's a season-ending two-parter. We're doing the first part now, and as always, we cover the first part as a standalone podcast, and we'll be back next week or 2 weeks from now with the wrap-up of Scorpion Part 2, which is the first episode of the fourth season. And I have to clarify, I don't know if I told you this, Clay, or if you remember, for some reason, I thought that Seven appears in this episode. She does not, which makes a lot more sense, actually, that she's only in the season after this, that she's not in this part at all. If I did say that, I apologize for leading everybody astray.
I have no way of knowing because
no memory.
I don't listen to a word you say.
No memory. This is a lot of shiny objects.
I'm not going to start now.
I see your lips stop moving. I go, oh, he's done. All right. Anyway, here on to the next thing. So
yeah, what most people don't know is we actually do this European style, the way that they used to shoot Italian movies, where they'd have a German guy, an American guy, and an Italian guy all speaking their own language, and then they would just wait till the person stops talking, and then you say their line.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a good Easter. Anyway, so on to Scorpion. I don't know. Where do you want to start with this one? We're not really, for some reason I opened this as if it was a wrap-up podcast, but it's not. This is just about Scorpion. So I don't know. What'd you think of Scorpion?
Ups and downs. Is this the first John Rhys Davies Star Trek appearance?
I can look that up. It might have been. He plays Leonardo in this one. Yeah.
I thought the opening was good. So you got this thing where the Borg.
This is his only appearance is this.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Borg are now in latter years professional wrestler mode, where you're using the Borg to put over a bigger talent, basically.
Right.
And I would say this is,
do you want to explain that for people who don't know wrestling terms?
Sure. Basically, when you're a big star in the wrestling world, eventually your value goes from selling tickets because you're the main event to losing to younger guys to make them the next main event.
Yeah. Your innate value is you no longer have the athleticism of what you used to provide, but you still have a name that is sellable.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, Hulk Hogan, for instance, very famous example. Hulk Hogan, champion, WWF forever, put over the Ultimate Warrior, who was the new hottest thing. It's like, well, if the Ultimate Warrior can beat Hulk Hogan, that's like the mark of the anointing that he's the next guy. very much like that situation. They put over this new talent in the episode, and ultimately seems to be kind of disappointing once you actually get a good look at him. So I thought and I say that as a big Ultimate Warrior fan of the character, not so much the person. Anyway, different story.
Mhm.
That's I was kind of into it. I was into what else can you do with the Borg at this point, aside from, I knew this was going to happen eventually, where it's like, all right, well, we got to use the Borg to have something else come in and to show you how dangerous this thing is. The Borg are afraid of it. So if the Borg are afraid of it, it means it's even crazier than the Borg. Sure.
Mhm.
I thought the biomechanical ship was pretty cool. Like, I think that scene was, they probably don't do that stuff as quite as well as they did on Enterprise, honestly.
Yeah,
Like,
Enterprise,
I think Enterprise does the creepiness better.
Yep.
And then that first guy busts out through the wall in all his late 90s CGI glory, and I just went, oh, because it was very underwhelming.
Would you have preferred a guy with a funny nose piece coming through with a gun?
Kinda. I don't know. Yeah. Like it's just, I guess it is what it is at this point, but 25 something years on, it didn't exactly fill me with the dread I think they were trying to. And also, like,
I thought the scene leading up to them was pretty good. I thought that, like, the being on the cube and, like, you hear it sort of like stomping around like it's a Resident Evil monster or something, and you're like, oh, what the hell's going on? Boarding the ship was pretty good. Like, my takeaway from this episode is that it's overtly attempting to this is like the Aliens to Alien version of Star Trek, where they're trying to beef up the best of both worlds. They're like, you thought one Borg cube was great. Here's 15 of them in your fucking face. And it's both good and bad for that in some ways. Like, it's everything feels bigger. It's probably the best, like, action episode Voyager has done, I think, so far, and just in terms of, like, raw action. I feel like it's enjoyable. I kind of come back to the, like you had mentioned, Species 8472's appearance not really blowing you over with how they look and everything like that. I feel the same about, apparently, the writers thought that a big moment for this one that they visualized, like the Braga and Menosky had this idea of, like, that they talked about in the Memory Alpha, of one of the images that they had was their image of the 15 Borg cubes going past Voyager. That was like, they thought that would be like a really special image thing to do. And it reminds me strongly of Aliens, which is just like, you add more of them. Not that Aliens is bad, but it's a different kind of movie. You add more of these things and that causes a problem. But I find myself just going back to Best of Both Worlds, and there's something so cool and eerie about the one cube that when you do 15 of them, and them going past Voyager causes Voyager to, like, bounce out of the way of all of them, it's like, this isn't quite as cool as it was before. I know that you think 15 of them should be impressive, but it strikes me as less impressive to have more of them moving at you like that.
But that's not the point they're doing it, though. They're not doing it to one up Best of Both Worlds. They're doing it to show you how scary this other thing is.
I know, like, but it doesn't change the fact that seeing a lot of Borg cubes makes them seem less impressive than just seeing one. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's I think that the episode kind of has its ups and downs. I think it's enjoyable. I think there's some I think the new species is disappointing for a number of reasons, not only because of the way they look, excuse me, but also because it seems like such a uninspired kind of copy of what the Borg do. It's like just the inverse of the Borg, which doesn't make a ton of sense. And they
and that they just are out to destroy. My problem with them is that their motivation seems to just be, we want to kill everything, which is not particularly great.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Borg are, we can assimilate everything, and their thing is nothing can assimilate us. So it's just opposite of the Borg. Yeah. And they don't have a cool catchphrase. They try to give them a cool catchphrase, but it doesn't work. It's pretty lame.
What's that? The weak shall perish, or
the
whatever
weak
they
shall
say?
perish. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. It
Doesn't
feels
roll off the tongue.
yeah, it feels too sweaty for me.
Yeah, sure.
And ultimately, the only reason they're there is they're there in service for something that's interesting, which is Janeway having to make a deal with the Borg. That's the most interesting thing they do in the episode, but it just makes me feel like, all right, well, these guys, I'm not really expecting to see these guys ever again if after this couple episodes are over.
Yep. You see them in 3 or 4 episodes of Voyager.
Kind of like the Ultimate Warrior. He got the championship, and then he had a couple matches that were whatever, and then it wasn't quite working, and so they moved on.
Yeah. I guess we can even start at the beginning before we go back to it. We rail against the show for having the Enterprise problem of bad cold opens. This is a great cold open. This is one of my favorite cold opens in all of Star Trek.
It's very fast. It's like 30
it's
seconds.
Very fast. It's a very effective idea. My one qualm is that I really think the First Contact had come out before this. It must have. When they abandoned the way that the Borg sound in First Contact, I think it was a big mistake. They should just always use the First Contact Borg voice because it sounds cool. And the Voyager and even the Best of Both Worlds stuff, they don't sound quite as eerie or like unsettling when they talk. They're just like, "Hi, we are the Borg." It's not quite as good.
Yeah.
So here's I don't know where to go with it. So like I found this to be a very watchable episode of Voyager in a way that I have not been finding the Voyager episodes to be watchable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was fun in a different way. It's kind of mysterious in a different way. I thought that they had good character moments in it. I'm still, and it sounds like you're kind of the same, I'm still a little bit not impressed with the way that the Borg have been utilized in this show so far. So if you remember back a couple episodes in the Unity episode when I brought up, like, I know Scorpion is coming at the end of the season. Do you think Unity is an effective use of the Borg to set up the Borg for what they are? And I guess I can flesh out my point now is that if they knew that they were building towards the Borg as a season finale, I think they should have had a couple episodes of showing the Borg at their best against Voyager before getting to this. So that when you get here to Scorpion, when you're like, oh shit, another Borg cube, and then it just goes past you and it's like, we have bigger problems to deal with. You're like, wow. That, like, cause it just feels a little bit like there was not the buildup that would have been effective to sell Species 8472 the way that they try to here in the terms of like being a season-long arc or like a season-long idea that you're developing down this line.
No, I would agree with that. Yeah. If the only other time you've seen the Borg this season is they're kind of not at 100%, it kind of undercuts what they're doing here, what the use of them in this episode, which is, the Borg are the ultimate evil, except for the even more ultimate evil that is makes what makes the boogeyman afraid,
Yeah.
I think it would have been, honestly, it probably would have been better if this was the first Borg episode, frankly.
Yeah.
If you had a choice between showing them less than 100 or just this being the first one, this is probably would be better served as the first one, because you have them in your mind as what you have them in your mind as what you remember them being, not what they were the last time you saw them. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
I think that the only counter argument would be like go against your argument against Ahsoka or whatever that show is called. Like I think that for new viewers of Voyager, you probably need a Borg episode or two where you're like, oh Jesus, like we got to get that. Like Voyager barely survives an interaction with them and then continues on.
If you are going the serialized route, yes, ideally,
yes, and it's. Because I would even hesitate to say that that's super serialized. It's just like establishing that this is what you're dealing with down the line, really. It's not like a continuing story or something. But I just think that in a way that Aliens works for me, which is that you add a whole bunch of more aliens and it makes it a different kind of movie. It becomes an action movie instead of like a horror thriller type thing. or slasher or whatever. Adding more Borg doesn't do the same for me in this. It just feels a little bit it feels a little bit too obvious that that's what they're trying to do. Like they're trying to make a big splash with introducing them. And I think that the focus on them kind of also serves a little bit to undercut Species 8472, because I don't think that you get enough of Species 8472. I don't know if you need it. Like, what did you think? Like, do you think that there's enough information about them, or did you feel that they just kind of popped up out of nowhere and that you just have to accept that that's what they are? They certainly don't have an ethos. Like they don't have a thing that's driving them. So they do function mostly as like they're a bad threat to the Borg. But I don't know. Like should you have, in continuing the Borg interaction, should they have tried to do what TNG did with the Borg, which is to hint at Species 8472 in the episodes that lead up to the Borg in the way that they did in TNG?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of splitting hairs at that point. Because yeah, I mean, obviously this stuff lands better if you have it thought out and lay the groundwork for it through the show, but they haven't really proven that that's the kind of thing that they are interested in or can do effectively.
Yep.
So it doesn't really surprise me that much that they just kind of show up in this. I think where it gets a little bit dicey is when towards the end of the episode, when it's like they're coming from possibly a different dimension. Like I don't think you need that stuff now. I think if they had leaned more into just the strength and the violence of and the unknowability of what's going on, it probably would land a little better. Because once you get into the thing where it's like they found this wormhole they're all coming out of or something, it's like, okay, sure.
Yep.
What you don't, that's not something you need to explain right now. You get into that in the next episode.
Yes, they do get into that in the next episode to explain them a little bit more. But it's I get them. I think they serve their purpose, I suppose. Like, so, I mean, so moving away from like the 8472 and the Borg conflict into what it does for Voyager, what I think is what it's probably the best thing about this episode is that it has a debate between the crew that is unusual for this show. Like they hardly ever disagree with each other. And Chakotay and Janeway, their ready room scene is probably one of the better Voyager scenes.
Oh,
really,
yeah,
about
definitely.
it. And it's like,
why is that? It's the thing that I always say. It's because when you have the two characters who have something to discuss, you know exactly what their point of view is, and so that point of view creates the drama of the scene and the tension of the scene because they have opposing viewpoints instead of just both just kind of hanging out and being, and you don't really know anything about any of these people. Yeah, Chakotay, you know exactly where Chakotay's coming from, you know exactly where Janeway's coming from, and it, you know, fuels the scene instead of just.
Well, do you not think that they're backwards from each other? Their arguments are backwards. In that Janeway's promoting we have to do whatever it takes to get home, and Chakotay is saying we should follow the rules about this.
No, honestly, because one of the things I noticed in this one that I've been noticing through the whole show is that Chakotay seems very cool with just fucking off and just being like, we're not going to make it. Let's just find a place. Anytime that option comes up, he's like, maybe we should think about it.
Maybe we should just retire to this planet.
He's not the one who's driving to get home, you know? Janeway's been doing it because it's her for herself but mostly for the crew. But Chakotay has always been, well, I guess we're stuck here. Let's build a village and just live the rest of our lives.
Even if he's always been that way, is that the way he should be set up as the Maquis character? Because I don't really care.
Too late for that. That ship has sailed at this point.
I don't think it's a bad decision to have them arguing the way that they are. I think it does add a little bit of fuel to the fire of Janeway's a little schizophrenic with her approach to these things, because there have been other episodes where she's like, no, we have to follow the rules all the time. And this is the only way, even if it costs us 3 years of getting home, we're going to follow the rules.
What's the rule here, though, that they would follow?
that they're not playing into this deal with the devil aspect. Like they should just leave things alone and not they shouldn't give the Borg information to commit a genocide against another species just because it enables them to get home faster.
Yeah, it's true.
Janeway's arguing that. That's what Janeway's saying that she wants to do. And there's no hint that she's going to say, escort us there and then, oops, I'm not giving you the information, and then we're just going to run away. It seems like she's legitimately considering doing this.
Sure.
And I think that's where the decision to make Species 8472 pure evil came from. Because if there was a nuance to it, I think Janeway's decision actually becomes more difficult to it, rather than the apocalypse alien has come through the wormhole and they're going to kill everything in this galaxy because that's their thing,
Yeah, I mean, because ideally, as everything was starting off, my first thought was like, well, why is this a bad thing? The
working
the
with the Borg, you mean?
Yeah, no. Why is the appearance of the species a bad thing? Because it's the Borg. We hate the Borg. Right. They are awful. These guys can clearly fuck them up.
And who says that in the episode? Someone says that, right?
I think somebody
Kim?
must.
I think Kim brings it up. He's like, they're our friends now because they hate the Borg. And Chakotay says, not so fast, Ensign.
Yeah. But, it is one of those things where it's like, well, on paper, maybe this isn't so bad. But obviously, if it stops them from getting anywhere, it needs to be addressed. But yeah, I think that they end up needing to have to make them seem objectively evil, otherwise
and farther reaching than the Borg. They don't just hate the Borg, they hate everything that's on this side of the universe. Yeah because it would be, I think
they're like the nihilists from The Big Lebowski. They believe in nothing.
Except for slap bass. Because I think Janeway's decision becomes harder, and I actually think there's a better wiggle space to create dialogue between the two of them, is if Species 8472 only wants to kill the Borg. That's like their only thing for whatever reason, is that they don't like the Borg, and this is going to be the outcome. Because then it becomes an argument about, is the genocide of your enemies a good thing? It becomes a and the Borg make that a difficult argument because the Borg are just one thing. There is no argument that people are different and you can't judge all the groups by the same thing because the Borg are literally just one thing. But they don't do that. So instead you have Janeway arguing for making a deal with the devil, and Chakotay bringing up the very... I have never heard this story told with a fox and a scorpion. It's a fucking frog, first of all. The frog has to swim across the water.
I feel like does that work? I think a scorpion is kind of too similar in size to a frog, would it not be?
It's always a frog.
Is it a frog?
Why is a fox swimming across the water? It's a frog that swims.
Get to the other side of the water. Same reason the chicken crossed the road.
Why did you cross it? Because it was there, said the frog.
I think they might be mixing up. What's that other parable?
The fox. Well, there's the riddle of getting the chicken, the grain, and the fox across the water.
They might be mixing it up with that one. Yeah.
But Chakotay takes the deal there. So the Borg are represented by the scorpion. What did you think of their argument? What did you think of the disagreement between Chakotay and Janeway in terms of the series, in terms of the episode, all that stuff?
I thought it was good. I think it was nice to see them actually debating some stuff on the show instead of just sort of having a concept and then just not really doing anything with it. Mm-hmm. It was nice to have the characters actually voicing some opinions and setting up a ethical dilemma that I think the one thing is excuse me, I do think Janeway goes a little too hard. I think they probably could have dialed her back a little bit in her it seems like
her zeal for genocide.
Yeah, it seems like at a certain point she just turns into Mr. Hyde or something when it comes to genocide, because she's like, I'm going to make a deal with the Borg. So it's a little, I think there's a little room for Janeway to be a little bit more conscious of what she's doing, because it's a big swing.
It is a big swing.
even if it works, there's no guarantee that that's going to be good for anybody.
I think I know what you're saying. Like I appreciate the battle lines being drawn in the points of view, because I like that for Voyager, because the show hardly ever has characters disagree about anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Voyager I was recognizing is Voyager is the Star Trek show where the characters explain shit to each other and no one disagrees about anything. They just explain shit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to have them disagree about something. I think that the disagreement, because they were trying to stress that this is the problem of the episode, they forced Janeway into a position where she's not exactly nuanced about what she's doing. And I think it would benefit both of the characters' arguments if they were a little more nuanced about it. And it was more like it was less of like a polar opposite thing and more of a trying to find a middle ground about what the best version of the center agreement is between them. Because I think that, as you're saying, like her zeal for killing the Borg, or not even really considering like that's the problem that we're coming up against, undercuts her a little bit. And getting home, I just feel it flies counter to her previous episodes where she's had that issue of the getting home faster and getting across Borg space seems like a low gain for the cost of what she's proposing, really. So I feel like they could have done that a little bit better.
Yeah. And I also started asking questions in my head too, like, all right, when they go on the ship, it's like, okay, put down your gun. As long as you don't present yourself as a threat, then they won't do anything to you. And then I start thinking, well, then why don't you just like casually fly through Borg space?
Right.
Like, why? What? Turn your shields off. Turn up your mariachi music or something. Show everybody you're having a good time.
Yeah.
And just cruise your way. I guess. And so that's the thing too. It's like the Borg seem very single-minded. Well, literally single-minded, but it seems a little weird to me that this is even necessary when it's clear that they have like the scene where all of the Borg cubes just go whisking by them. The thing that tells me is that this new species is a bigger issue than Voyager. Right. And so it kind of makes me think, well, then why are they worried about flying through Borg space at all if they're
right, let them have the war. You want to prolong the war between the Borg and species 8472.
Right, exactly. Just, kind of moonwalk your way out of there,
This is true. So now we're running into the issue of, say they did that, you've set up 8472 as a galactic ending threat at that point. So you have to reverse course.
That's
right?
the thing. Yeah. You have to, once you set it up as the galactic ending thing, it's like, well, you can't just
leave the Borg to it.
Yeah. And obviously Harry's got giant alien boogers come out of his face.
Right. And I don't remember how Scorpion wraps up, but that must be the turn, right? Is that they get to it and they realize that 8472 is a bigger threat at this point and they have to work with the Borg to defeat them, in a way that's not just, here's the toxin that will kill them. It has to go deeper than that. I honestly don't remember how it works out, but yeah. What'd you think of the episode as an action spectacle? What did you think of its pacing and everything like that? I thought its pacing was kind of neat. It has a lot of callback things. The Borg graveyard is very similar to the graveyard of ships at Wolf 359. Like there's like very obvious sort of comparisons about what you're supposed to be seeing. I thought that the scenes moved well to the next one. Like the pace kept going, and I thought that was pretty effective. The Borg cube is probably I understand why they had to do it. I think that the Borg cube sequence is probably my least favorite of the sequences.
You mean when the away team goes on there?
When they go on the cube, yeah. And they see the new alien and stuff like that. I understand why they had to do it.
The Borg bodies exhibit.
Yeah, the Hellraiser type, or like Event Horizon. Borg just piled in pieces. Yeah. I thought that they did. I think that the idea of 8472 is kind of novel. You just can't assimilate them. And, they're more powerful than everything else. They have the bioships and stuff like that. I don't know. And then at the end, I thought the end was fine. I'm not really crazy. Like, it's another thing of the scale being blown up. And there's a patron comment about this. So I'm kind of holding off on saying anything, but there's a sense of the scale of like blowing up the Borg planet is
that what the planet was? It was the Borg planet?
Yeah, they said there were 3 planets in that system and they're all Borg. There's like billions of
gotcha.
Borg on each planet.
Gotcha.
I think my problem with it is that this is the turning point of where like TV budgets and just a general sense of like how movies have developed recently, it's getting too big.
Yeah.
Really. It's like the problem is too big for me to really think that this is a believable or like relatable, or not even relatable, but like it just comes back to the best of both worlds. It's such a small conflict. You never see anything outside of what's going on the Enterprise, right? You don't see Wolf 359 or anything. You just see the after effects. You don't see the Borg ship is not like bombarding Earth and people, like cities are being destroyed and stuff like that. It's just, it gets there at the very end and then they stop it. But I don't know how you felt about it. I feel that my biggest problem with Scorpion is that it feels like it's trying too much to be too big of an event, and on a TV budget, and with the concept of the Borg, and with how bigger galaxy-ending stories just don't feel as satisfying. I feel that that's where it falls apart a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's all inherent with the way they present the new species. It's just there's nothing behind them other than they're just bigger and badder than the Borg.
Yeah,
because the whole thing that made the Borg special the first time they showed up was that they did have this really fucked up ethos that was sort of a dark mirror image of what the Federation was doing.
Yeah,
and so just having a new guy show up who's just, not to go back to wrestling, but having the Ultimate Warrior show up who's just got bigger muscles. Mm-hmm. It only gets you so far, unfortunately. Yeah. And I mean, like blowing up the planet, I think that stuff, like at this point, who cares? Like it's a planet full of Borg, so whatever. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
But also it's like, in Star Trek 2009, when Vulcan gets blown up, is it Vulcan? Yeah, it's Vulcan.
Yeah.
When Vulcan gets blown up, that works because everybody knows that what Vulcan is, and the fact that you see Spock and all that, all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
There's an emotional attachment to it that anchors the cosmic level thing that's happening. Here it's just, they have the capabilities to blow a planet up, I guess, which is and also you're getting into that space where it's like, I never thought you could do this on Star Trek, but it's like when I was watching, I think I've probably mentioned this before, but when I was watching 24, I knew that they had jumped the shark when someone set off a nuclear bomb inside the borders of the United States. And I was like, okay, we've lost all people. First of all, people just don't know how nuclear bombs work anymore, that they are setting them off as the opening season premiere plot point of the show of this fairly quote unquote grounded show. Someone set off a dirty nuclear bomb in downtown Los Angeles. It's like, okay, I don't think Jack Bauer is the thing we should be focusing on if that happens.
Yeah.
But it's just like this level of destruction and level of whatever that's just, it's hard to relate to. And it also, it's like you're saying, it's too big. Like it's too big of a thing to happen with zero consequences. Like something like that should, like, blowing up a planet should like destabilize the entire solar system, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, even then the consequence there is large. Like I almost think that Star Trek as a show is probably better suited to, they want the war to continue and they spend a couple episodes trying to sneak across Borg territory or something. And there's there's all the nuance of what's going on with there. I think at that point, that also gives you a little bit of chance to, like, you can actually have 8472 species be about something. They're allowed to become an opinionated species that has like a thing that they're about.
Yeah.
And you could contrast that with the Borg and everything like that. I feel there's a whole do you feel sorry for the Borg? It sounds like you don't, because you were like, oh, let's blow up all the Borg planets. But like, I was wondering if the show had a moment to, especially they read the quotes from Picard where he's like, fuck the Borg. I hate all the Borg all the time. They're all the worst. I feel like there was a moment, and maybe the franchise flip-flops because it does whatever is best for it, but the show and the franchise wants to flip-flop between the Borg are salvageable and the Borg are not salvageable.
Right.
And they never really give a good answer for the way they're constructed. I think reality would tell me that they are an unsalvageable thing. But what they do is they separate people from the collective and they give them their lives back. And then they say, see, they can be people too, which I feel is not really true, because it's like the collective is the Borg. So like once you pull people out of it, it's not really the same thing that you're dealing with. You haven't convinced anybody of anything. You've just kind of like turned them back to the way they were. But as they're functioning as a collective, they're pretty nasty. But I don't know. What did you? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, do you feel bad for the Borg in this episode at all, that they've come against a nasty creature, or are we supposed to feel bad for them or anything like that?
I think I'm not totally sure. I feel like you're probably supposed to feel bad. If not feel bad, I think one of the things that it does do is it repositions the Borg and makes you kind of view them as, regardless of what they have or haven't done, they are a species of beings.
Yeah, living
yeah,
creatures.
And like, at what level do you put aside your hatred of what they may or may not have done in the service of, helping someone when they're down?
Human rights, or
the humanity of helping them out. Because like, it's if you believe for a second that anybody could be saved from the Borg, then you probably don't want to be of the mindset that you should just kill everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, given what they're going to do next season, pretty good move, because now you've got, with 7. Yeah. Cause if you're bringing a Borg onto the ship as part of the crew, and that's really putting a face to, the idea that underneath the stormtrooper helmet is an actual person.
Yeah. Yeah. I run into
brainwashed or not,
Yeah, I guess it kind of runs into the problem, because it's like because they're maybe it'll be probably good something to talk about when 7 actually shows up, but like their actions as the collective are all that kind of matters to me, really. Yeah. So it's like I think that I feel that like it's an action episode, so they're not particularly interested in this, and I'm not going to hold it against them. But I feel like there was a space for a little bit of discussion and even more crew animosity and debate about like whether or not the Borg deserve help, and maybe like, because what they're doing, they're using them only to get home faster, to get across their territory. So it's not like there's a real concern for what the situation is about them. And I think some of the crew members,
they're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart,
Right. Yeah. So it's like it's a purely transactional thing, which is kind of fine, and I'm okay with that. But it's I guess it's just rubbing up against like the galaxy-ending implications. It doesn't feel like maybe that's part 2, but it doesn't feel like the crew has really like come to deal with that yet. They're just kind of like, we need to get home, so we're gonna do what we need to do.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, because you gotta kind of think of like what the relatable version of that would be. It's like if in World War II, this new entity showed up and was only targeting the Nazis, mm-hmm. and was in danger of wiping the Nazis out, do you help the Nazis, or do you go, fuck them? Because I feel like most people would say, fuck them, and probably rightly so. But
they would. But in that analogy, after killing the Nazis, they would kill everybody else. Is the situation here.
Right.
So it's like, yes, and maybe that's I guess you need that for the complication, but that is my argument against the Borg. Like, I think the galaxy is better without the Borg in it, I suppose. Yeah. It's just that they have to amp it up by, species 8472 can't do that. nuanced.
I don't think this is an exact one-to-one, but it reminds me a little bit of in Oppenheimer. There's a part where I might be screwing this up, but more or less I think this is what it is. One of the scientists comes up with a calculation where he thinks that there's a chance they might destroy the entire world, like that the chain reaction would never stop and the actual atmosphere would catch fire. And it's or maybe, I can't remember if it's that specifically or if it's just the bomb in general. But they go to Einstein, talk to Einstein about it, and basically the Oppenheimer's like, what should we do if this is true? And he said, you should give this calculation to the Nazis immediately, because it's the kind of thing where it's like you as a human being would have to realize what was going to happen if they continued down this road, where it supersedes any sort of political or war-based thing where it's like, no, you don't understand this. We're going to end the world. And so we have to come to a certain compromise for the greater good. But, I don't know how much that relates, but it just popped into my head as we were talking about it.
Yeah, so like the Nazis are distinct from the Borg in that way. Like I would say that it's interesting because it's a level of belief, but there are certain groups now, if you gave them that weapon, they would use it and destroy the world. Like it's typically religiously inspired. Like if you believe in jihad or something, you're going to use that weapon. The Borg and the Borg are more like that, I think, than the Nazis were. The Nazis were more like of a political thing. It's like they were. It's kind of like the Soviets. They're based in reality on some level. Right. They're like, well, we can't all die. That would be a terrible thing to happen.
Yeah.
The Borg, I guess, are the other way, in that the Borg are, willing to throw themselves away and blow up ships and stuff like that. And
I apologize if I took two separate scenes from Oppenheimer and pushed them together, but the sentiment is what I was trying to get at.
It's fusion, not fission.
Yes.
Or the other way around. All right, so we can go to Patreon thoughts if you want at this point, unless you have anything else you want to say about Scorp.
I don't think so.
Did you like the ending with the ship just fucking off carrying Voyager along?
No, because it kind of speaks to what we're talking about the planet explosion being too big, because this planet explodes and basically after that it's just Janeway going, whoa, I hate maybe that. You've reminded me. I like the Janeway on the cube scenes probably less, because it's a lot of bad, shaky body acting, and I don't know why they brought her onto the ship at all in the first place. That makes no sense. It's just a plot thing. They didn't pick a very visually interesting place to do that. Like, no. I guess they didn't want to build a set, so it's clearly a blue screen behind her. But like,
it's supposed to convey that there's a lot of Borg, I guess, on there. But
it looked like she showed up on like a catwalk of like a convention center or something. The place where Archer talks to Daniels, where they're looking down at the whatever Foundation Day thing.
Yeah, that's right. If you also poor road design there, if all the Borg are leaving work at the same time, they have to go across that one crosswalk to get to the other side. You get traffic jams for days. I've played SimCity. I know what I'm talking about. So I guess we're done with Scorpion. I didn't mind the ending, but it's another thing. It's like the planet blows up, all the Borg ships get blown up, and then that one just survives and it pulls Voyager away. I maybe would have preferred the impending 8472s bearing down on them or something like that, as they, the Borg are getting ready for it or whatever, but it's not what happens.
Way too close to that explosion.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
I feel like that's the kind of thing where you got to do it. It's way, way off in the distance, and
they see it from afar, and they see
and then like a couple seconds later, they get hit with the wave or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's
that's the scene. That's the scene. That's the scene I would have liked to see the Borg cubes flying by, like all the Borg cubes leaving after that happens. I think I didn't mind it. It's just I can understand Menosky and Braga's idea that that's what they want to do. Like that's how you escalate this. But looking in hindsight, I'm just like it's just not as effective.
I'm surprised they didn't put a finer point on that scene, because I think the thing that's notable about it is that the Borg are running away.
Yeah.
Which is not something the Borg do. And so
I think they're running towards the battle, right? They're going towards the battle because they get destroyed where they are.
Oh, that's all the ones that are flying by. That's what they're doing. They're going towards.
I think they're going to help.
I thought they were
Borg
running from.
I don't think so.
Things. I probably just wasn't paying attention to that part, but.
Well, I mean, I only assume that because when they chase them down, they're all destroyed, and I.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I thought that they were going to where there was a bad thing happening or something.
Well, then I like it less then because I think it would be better if they were running away.
Yeah. Because they haven't seen species 8472 at that point. I don't think. No, they haven't because they don't know what they're doing. Right. So we'll see. We'll see what
they should do. The species they should see is species starring Natasha Henstridge, because then there would be no reason for violence after you watch that movie.
Everyone would be
violence to your own other regions.
Everyone would have post-nut clarity about what the situation of the moral dilemma is.
Resistance is futile, indeed.
Yeah. We got Robert Beltran in there too. I can't find the fact here, but the other writerly thing that I really enjoyed about this is that just a naming convention. I'm trying to find it now, but I can't find it. But originally, Species 8472 had another digit on their name, and I think they wisely cut it because it's a nice rhythm to 8472. It's like easily rememberable, and like it has like a telephone cadence to it. You just kind of say it. But if you 84723 is too many digits in their name, you know.
What if you said 8472? I guess that still works.
What if you said 8675309?
Ooh. The Jenny species.
Yes, this is Jenny. All right, we'll go to patron thoughts then. Thanks everybody for listening today. If you enjoyed the content and our coverage of the third season of Voyager, which thankfully is done, but we'll get to more about that in the wrap-up show next week. You can leave your thoughts at patreon.com/Lipinski File. A couple dollars a month gets you that ability. It also gets you extra podcasts that you can listen to, and that's always fun. So go there, patreon.com/Lipinski File, and support us and support the podcast. Clay, I will send you the first one to get going here. I'm going to send it over to our Discord. You guys can join the Discord if you're so inclined to talk about Star Trek and everything else, chess, movies, video games, etc. Clay, this is Fragrant Farter Kyle Barrett, our most pretentious of patrons and listeners, who does not appreciate other people's opinions very well.
Scorpion Part 1. An engaging and well-performed episode that dumps a big old dilemma on Janeway and then gleefully watches her struggle and squirm like we've never seen before. Making Janeway lonely and desperate is a fascinating direction, but what sells it is Chakotay's reaction, finally willing to disagree with his captain. I wish their relationship was always like this, instead of Chakotay being some dickless Dickleby, allowing Janeway to stand on his back and work his arms like an elliptical. Because their scene in the ready room is his best in the entire series. Making Species A472 pure evil eliminates some of the moral dilemma, but focuses things more on the Borg, which is probably wise. From Indiana Jones to James Bond, Lord of the Rings, to that appearance on BBC Question Time, where he banged on a desk and shouted, "Oh, woman!" at someone who disagreed with him about Trump. John Rhys Davies is always good value, even if Brian Blessed should have been cast instead. 5 woke recastings of foxes taking the roles of honest, hardworking frogs in retellings of Aesop's fables out of 5. Let's not forget Sliders. That's how my first introduction to John Rhys Davies was Sliders.
Yeah.
Mr. Mallory.
I have not enough viewings of Sliders, but for some reason I think that Sliders is underrated. For whatever reason. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a viable thing to think.
That's a hot take based on no evidence.
That's the kind of opinions that the internet needs, which is that I haven't seen this, but I'm sure it's underrated.
Only have the vaguest of memories from when I was about 11, but I feel like that show should have won multiple Emmys.
It should have done a lot more. It's such a clear Quantum Leap ripoff, unfortunately, that's the downside of it. But Norman Buchwald says, Scorpion Part 1, I have to admit the second Borg story in Voyager ends up being one of the better ones in Trek. Yeah, Janeway's clever idea is definitely controversial, but it does provide the dilemma, how do you get home with this big Borg territory in front of her? Species A472 is also intriguing as a new Dalek. Is it Dalek or Dalek style bad?
Dalek.
Dalek style bad. And it's clearly told in context that the entire galaxy may be in danger, and I'd argue much more compelling than all the times in Discovery when the same case was made. And I even find Part 2 more compelling. 5 8472 ships in a pattern as a Death Star out of 5. Go to the next comment here. Woodrow, I'll just read this one. Scorpion Part 1.
Before you start that, I just don't think the design is good on these guys. Like the ships look like flying dildos.
Yeah.
And the actual species is like, I don't know.
A tripod. That's their big thing, is that they have 3 legs.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, I thought they were like, I thought it was like 4. So it's like that weird AI picture you generated. Was that guy with the weird chicken hand? He was actually.
That's what I typed in. Give me a picture of 8472. and they gave me that thing. Yeah. AI can't do hands, I guess. But yeah, it's
so fascinating. Imagine, that's why all the Borg only have like little spinny things.
That's I should just say, give us Borg hands and all the things. But would you? I mean, you draw for a living. Is the hand the hardest thing to? Is there something just hands the AI can't do it?
Hands are deceptively difficult. Yeah. Yeah. Because they can. You don't realize how many.
I thought you were going to say they can bend. Yeah, there's a lot of points of inflection.
It's a lot of different angles, and like they don't. The way that they bend is not uniform does not look uniform from every angle, you know?
Right, yeah, because all your fingers are different sizes.
Yeah, once you get into like perspective, they start getting kind of weird and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, but AI is very bad at it at this point.
It's terrible. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's very bad.
I find the AI stuff really interesting because there is it really shows you how the human eye views an image to a certain extent, because it creates this impression of what you're asking it to do that at first glance, even the good ones, or I should say especially the good ones, at first glance they look flawless.
Yeah, they look fine. Yeah,
you kind of like take a second to really take in what you're looking at, and then you start seeing some weird shit. Then you start seeing weird chicken hands and third legs and perspective that just doesn't make any sense. But it's a really interesting look at the idea of what image making is.
Yeah, how it's about training these machines to look at something in a human way. It's really just a different way of viewing reality. What the machine wants is not what we are like. This is a normal looking picture. It's looking at something completely different and just spitting it out. But Firefly did improve with that update. It made things look better. It still has, as you were saying, it has like horrible flaws in it still, but it's like it's much more realistic looking than it was a couple weeks ago. So
I just feel bad because there's a whole. I mean. I don't think it should be used for commercial stuff. But I think there's a whole subset of digital artists who are probably very wrongly going to get ostracized because a lot of that stuff looks a lot like their artwork, and this has the same kind of glossy computer style to it. That is the way that a lot of people paint digitally and stuff. And now that look is becomes so ubiquitous with AI that it's going to be really difficult for a lot of those people, I think, to not get written off as AI artists, even if they're not using AI. I hope not. I hope that's not the case, but that's how it seems to me.
I mean, if you have Firefly do non-photorealistic image generation, it comes out pretty good. It looks fine. Like it doesn't have these weird issues of being photorealistic that it has. But I mean, it's kind of self-fulfilling because I assume a lot of those artists are using Adobe products, right? So Adobe gave them the ability to make their art with the limitations of Adobe. You know what I mean? Like they gave them the tools that gave that style to arise. And now Adobe is kind of claiming it back and saying like, because I guess Adobe is kind of interesting. Adobe Firefly only uses Adobe stock images and videos. So that's why it's kind of limited at this point, because it's not going out there and like grabbing everything. But which is ethical, I think, too, for Adobe, but it is just like if you used it. Yeah.
I think it's still a little dicey, but yeah.
We'll see. It'll all sort itself out. Maybe. We'll see. It's just a year from now. It's going to be a million times better.
Oh
than
yeah,
it is right.
No
that's
kidding.
the thing.
That's the problem.
We're gonna look back on this and go like, what the fuck were we talking about? Like, this doesn't look like anything, but
it's just that's the failsafe, is that whoever wrote these programs were like, we have to make sure that this thing doesn't become completely sentient, so just make sure it can't draw hands, because that drives every real artist insane. There's no reason the computer artist should be any different.
Let me see your hands. This is Royo with Scorpion Part 1.
Scorpion Part 1. So much has been written about and said about Scorpion that I'll just use this opportunity for a challenge to the podcast. Is this episode better or worse than Best of Both Worlds? I've seen a few people say that. I don't even think it's close.
Yeah, we'll answer it here. Finish the comments and we'll answer.
And if so or not, what storytelling element made Best of Both Worlds or Scorpion the better story? Is Riker's dilemma and character contradictions more compelling than Janeway's I want to be captain / I don't want to be captain versus the Prime Directive is worth sacrificing the crew for / to hell with the Federation principles? I'm getting my crew home with an alliance with the Borg. Even Chakotay adopts a Federation-like stance against Janeway's cynical and pragmatic Maquis-like stance when it comes to the Borg. The definitive Star Trek episode, 5 out of 5.
What do you think? You think Scorpion is much better? Kyle Barrett, I couldn't tell if he was trolling, but he said Scorpion is better than Best of Both Worlds.
I don't. It's the Borg are just such a compelling villain that it's really difficult to put them up against these guys, because I don't really find these guys compelling. I find that the ethical thing is interesting. That's definitely the highlight of the episode. But I also think the pure craft of Best of Both Worlds Part 1 is much better than this.
There's so much more neat tone and like eerie terror that's in Best of Both Worlds. Can you think of a single shot in this episode that comes close to Locutus turning and looking into the camera for the first time? I even think the first time they see the cube, when they zoom in on it and the music starts playing in the background. And let's not. I mean, would you rather see the shockwave of a CGI planet exploding than doing a track in on fucking Jonathan Frakes when he says fire at the end? Come on, let's be serious, guys. It's fine. It's a fine episode, but Best of Both Worlds it is not. I agree. Best of Both Worlds is far beyond it. The two reasons, just to recap from that I said about the episode, is that Voyager feels like it's trying to be big. Best of Both Worlds is much more effective at being a small episode. And I do think that Riker's dilemma is more interesting than the debate about whether or not you work with the Borg in this episode. Yeah. But Riker losing a father figure and sort of like tying it into whether or not he wants to leave the Enterprise and then being forced to be put into that role and stuff like that is just a neater concept. And it's just way more eerie. I like the eeriness of Best of Both Worlds. It has great music. It's just so like creepy, it's all that stuff. So Scorpion's a fine episode, but it's just in comparison.
To paraphrase the Amish guy from that episode of The Simpsons when they're trying to build a pool, 'tis a fine episode you've got here, English, but 'tis no Best of Both Worlds.
Taxel Bear says, Scorpion Part 1, there's something even worse than your worst antagonist plot. I like both the idea of Species A472 and their bioships as well as that of a bargain with the Borg, even if this two-parter suffers from 90s CGI. Also, I wish Species A472 was just bioships. Come on, make some really alien aliens already. It's a good point. Did they need to be tripod people walking around?
Yeah, I think there's I don't find anything scary about these guys. The Borg are inherently scary. I think they could have probably taken a different approach to them visually that would make them much more scary.
Yeah.
Instead of, looking like The Rock at the end of The Mummy Returns or whatever.
Yeah, they remind me of Motaro from from Mortal Kombat or something like that. Yeah. This is Bob J. Kester.
Kintaro.
I looked it up.
Is it Kintaro? I think it's Kintaro.
Kintaro.
The one from the tiger striped one?
Yeah, he's like a horseman, like a centaur type thing.
Okay. I know what you think. I know what you're talking about.
Isn't that Motaro? I think his name was Motaro. You read this comment. I'll look it up.
Scorpion Part 1. My favorite part is the behavior of the individual Borg drones on the damaged
it's Motaro. Motaro. There we go. Sorry, go ahead.
Simultaneously pathetic and dangerous, and the way they and the away team keep overtaking each other, moving in the same directions, and trying to do essentially the same thing. Looking forward to the rare Trek Part 2 that's better than Part 1. 4 out of 5.
Not an uncommon opinion, I guess, at this point. Sorry, for some reason skipped there. Matt Ross says, Scorpion Part 1, the opening of the cubes being destroyed and then and when I see it now always makes me go, what the heck? The warp drive wakes of the Borg cubes and Voyager being tossed aside. The realization of being more in Borg space and attempts to get around it unscathed is interesting, as is the CGI alien 8472 being super tough and a bigger existential threat. Hollow Da Vinci is a useless drain in the episode and a waste of John Rhys Davies. That aside, the deal with the devil, complete with a Christian symbolism in the background, being worked out by Janeway, is a dark and desperate decision that seems another questionable choice, and the pain she emotes is about being alone, worth the weight of command, is a nice character development. Of course, Ensign Kim is attacked with a yellow-green alien snot. 4 cubes out of 5.
I'm never going to complain at a John Rhys Davies appearance. So,
did you like the DiCaprio
stuff? Was great.
Did you like the Da Vinci
when he tried to draft Paris and Kim into the Pussy Posse? Yeah, I did, and I think it's 90% John Rhys Davies. But I thought it was pleasant, and it was is that a whole subroutine on hollow novels or whatever you want to call them, where it's like there's a version where you get to be smarter than one of the world's greatest
I was thinking it looks like you're building a flying machine.
Yeah,
Leonardo, could I give you a little hints how to do this better, dipshit? It's very smug. It's an incredibly smug. It would be like me making like a caveman program and being like, make the fire, motherfucker. Like it's that kind of thing. It's just very, very silly. Hat says, Scorpion Part 1, Janeway's plan is to delete the Doctor if the Borg choose to take the information. Let's reimagine this and say Tuvok had the information memorized. I highly doubt Janeway would ever consider this plan and put Voyager in a position where her plan B was to execute Tuvok. Granted, the Doctor, I presume, would be reinitiated with factory settings, but I really felt like there should have been a scene where we see the Doctor volunteer for this. In unison with Part 2, I would consider this a 5 out of 5, but as a single episode, it's a 4 unnecessary skeletal locks out of 5.
I did like the transporter locking onto the skeleton. That was... I mean, unfortunately, you don't get the fun version of that, which is just it only transports the skeleton.
Yeah, I know.
Which would be great.
I didn't like the little she's like, I'll beam them out with their skeleton, and Janeway looks at it, she goes, I just made it up. That felt like something you don't need to say. Point Extra G says, Scorpion Part 1, they definitely try to grab your attention with the Borg right away. Everything from the cold open all the way through the episode is solid. They try to outdo the Best of Both Worlds cliffhanger ending, but it seems like it is building to something. And it's got John Rhys Davies and who's just very randomly inserted. Is it Davies or Davis? Sorry, am I pronouncing it
I believe
correctly?
It's Davies.
Davies, okay.
Yeah.
This is Jaron Hatch with the latest comment, and I'm going to send this one to you, and you can read it.
The show is clearly aping the success of Star Trek's other Season 3 Borg cliffhanger, which should be a recipe for an eye-rolling flop, but it somehow works. While the Borg are starting to lose their teeth at this point in the franchise, the presence of species 8472 really ratchets up the tension. It really works no matter how you say it. Really ratchets up the tension.
8,472. We need commas in their name, people.
Where was I? Really ratchets up the tension and stakes. That said, it's the dynamic between Janeway and Chakotay that makes the episode, and I desperately wish we had seen more of this in the seasons building up to it. And while controversial, I get tickled at seeing Janeway shift into a might be genius, might be completely insane mama bear captain. Her unique brand of measured recklessness makes her a bit of a wild card when compared to the other captains in the franchise, and I am here for it. 4.5 standard definition CGI visual effect shots in desperate need of an HD remaster out of 5.
Yeah. Quickly, as I move to the next comment, what do you think about Janeway's characterization so far?
I kind of wish they would go further with it and have her just be like more cabin feverish. So
I wish it was written in a way that it was a consistent character trait, which I don't think it is. It's not a consistent that she's always reckless or ready to do something or push.
It does feel like they are writing her for the episode, not for the season or series.
Yeah. Artoria says, Scorpion, Part 1, probably the best two-parter in Voyager. The tension leading up to the deal with the Borg was great. I thought the visual of the dark shadows mixed with the light when Janeway decided to make a deal with Devil, coupled with Mulgre's look of insight and horror, all in one with the realization of what she was about to do, was fantastic. And guess what else? Chakotay grows some balls and actually acts like a first officer for once. Too bad we didn't get more of this earlier. Side thought, it would have been better to have vengeful species 8472 on a galactic warpath with a weakened Borg predicating an alliance with Starfleet, where Picard had to work with the Borg, the one species he hates, to survive in a survive or die scenario, where he has to deal with PTSD, anger, and mistrust he feels coupled with his duty. Guest starring Janeway. 7 in the old crew. 5 destroyed Borg cubes out of 5. Changeling says, Scorpion Part 1, there's a major plot hole in this episode in that Da Vinci could have just given the crew the Ark of the Covenant to fight species 8472, and it would have been all over with. But then again, it was something man was not meant to disturb. I liked this episode. The highlight was the dynamic between Chakotay and Janeway, but I loved the nonchalant way of Janeway saying, don't worry if we get attacked. I'll make sure to kill the doctor first. 5 genocidal weapons being looked after by top men out of 5. Christian Pouch has our next comment about Scorpion, and I will send it to you.
What is the Da Vinci Ark of the Covenant thing?
Isn't that those books? That's what I thought it was. Those big books that were a top seller a long time ago, like 20 years ago.
The Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code, yeah, I think that's what it is.
Oh, all right.
This is Christian Pouch with Scorpion.
I thought he found it. I was excited. What a fucking banger of an episode. We begin with the shocking and very brief cold open, follow it up with some of the most atmospheric and eerie scenes Voyager has ever done. The fleeing Borg armada is terrifying for multiple reasons. The exploration of the derelict cube is creepy and haunting. The tension of the Borg negotiations is palpable. On top of it all, we get the top-tier interpersonal conflict between Janeway and Chakotay. And the only question is, why don't they let these characters do this all the time? Even the holodeck scene fit in perfectly. Chakotay's Indian story, too. 5 out of 5. And a top 10 in Trek.
Incel who needs his pants on says, Scorpion Part 1, this episode reminds us of frogs who ride on scorpions across the river and stung the frog that died, and the scorpion drowned and also died because he can't swim this way. That's why he rode the frog. 3 out of 5. Thank you, Incel.
Maybe it's just like, you know how there's urban legends that depending on what region of the country you're from, they have like a different aspect to them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the deal. Maybe it's just that this is
like the Arizona
telephone game. Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about with the fox, you mean? Like
yes.
Yeah.
So, or it's also been 200 years. Maybe the stories just, evolved naturally.
I think the frog swimming makes a lot of sense. He would ask the frog, not the fox, to bring him across. Malo Provoso says, sure. Scorpion Part 1, finally an episode worth Mr. Malo commenting on. Hoping that you guys discuss Species 8472 as a new OP antagonist, and that its very name implies that there are only 8,472 different space species known to the Borg. Because I thought it would be more like in the hundreds of thousands, if not in the millions plus. 5 out of 5. Forget the bad pun. Do you think it's too low? Seems okay.
I guess that only
is it humanoid species?
That it's only that's the number, and that's the point at which they discovered them. Right? Doesn't necessarily have to be that it's so they could go higher than that. They could have,
but they're just stuck in the middle. They found things afterwards.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess I would say that maybe they're only categorizing species that they can actually assimilate and do things with. So like a bacteria doesn't count as a species. It has to be like a thing that you take on with you. You know, one of the I don't know why this reminded me. One of the smarter things in this episode I thought was I did like the idea that the Borg are incapable of inventing new things, because they gain knowledge from assimilation and they can't just come up with a different idea of how to do something. I felt that should have been.
That's fun.
That's such a cool idea that I feel that you could play that up more as part of the scripts. That's a neat realization that that's the case.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Atanga says this comment. This is the second to last. You have this one, and then I'll read the final one right after you. So this is Atanga.
I'm going to kick off this new era of Voyager with an unpopular opinion. 7 of 9 is not a great character. I get
Getting
it.
in early with it before she even shows up. Just bring it.
I get it that they couldn't just make a female Data, but her hostile delivery and smug attitude are so emotional and un-Borg-like that I have trouble ever buying into the character. Regarding the episode, I never understood the comparison with Best of Both Worlds. Scorpion is much less focused and feels much less important to the universe and the characters. But that said, it's a great leap for Voyager, and I'll even give it an extra tentacle for the awesome shot of the Borg cube noping out of the battle with an outgunned Voyager in tow. 4 disgusting nose tentacles out of 5.
Final comment from Jonas. Scorpion Part 1, 5 out of 5. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for leaving your comments about Scorpion Part 1. You can leave your comments about Scorpion Part 2 up on the Patreon page. Become a patron, support us there, leave your comments, all that stuff. Clay, I'm going to say this is like a 4.5 average from the patrons at this point, doing public math like that. But what'd you think about this one as the season ender and the episode itself? What you going to give Scorpion on our scale of 1 to 5?
I'll give it a 4. That was good.
Is it a top 10 Voyager episode for you?
A Voyager? I mean, probably. Just
top 5?
I mean, I guess.
Top 3?
I don't remember. Probably not. I'm not. I don't know. It was fine. It was good. Mm-hmm. It's not. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's top 3.
Sorry, being really non-committal with my answer.
I know you have no memory for these things.
Yeah,
I
think
think
it's the tough part.
I think it's top 3 for me. But Voyager as a whole is less impressive than some of its sister shows. So it's like, I'm also going to give this a 4. I really enjoyed this in a way that I find Voyager episodes to be rarely enjoyable while watching it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want the show to always be this way, but I thought that this did a good job of, for a show that tries so clearly to ape TNG in a lot of ways, this one was the first one that I was like, you're actually doing a decent job aping a better show. Like your conflict here is semi-interesting. There's some stakes to it. Things are going on and stuff like that. And for that reason, I'll give it a 4. But why is it not a 5 for you? Just because of the bigness of it that we talked about before, or just the...
Yeah, I mean, that I think more than that is the... I just don't really find much interesting about the
new species.
The number people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not a 5 just because it doesn't have, as we said before, like the eerie weirdness of Best of Both Worlds is just not there. It's a repeat of it, and it's bigger, but it's not as effective as what Best of Both Worlds did. So I'll give it a 4 as well. Although a couple of people said Part 2 is better. The rare 2-parter where Part 2 is better, so we'll see about that. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for leaving your thoughts on Patreon. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we go?
Check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show on Patreon. Well, and on your regular feed, but on Patreon this year, we're doing Video Nasties. We're talking about Dario Argento, Toby Hooper, the grandpappy of them all. In October, we're doing Last House on the Left, which is a Wes Craven's first movie, minus some of the other weird shit he was doing before that. It's like his first like real movie, I think.
Yeah.
And Badass is on a bit of a break. We should be back soon with Return of the Joker and a bit of a probably do a Q&A. Sean will probably talk about Zorro or something. Check out Sean's
back on.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should get him
Voyager
on to talk about Voyager. Yeah, check out Sean's Kickstarter for the Zorro book that he's in the process of making. It's very, very cool. Yeah, that's about it.
And I talked to Zach Handlin, who's been on the show before, who does some of the Trek reviews, and he was willing to do a joint Patreon podcast where we each we'll record the video or whatever and put it on each of our Patreon feeds. That'll probably be about, because he's doing Enterprise now. We're kind of opposites of each other. He's doing Enterprise while we're doing Voyager, and he had done Voyager and we'd already done Enterprise. So I think like a general conversation about like late era Trek would be decent enough to have. Nothing specific, but we'll do that at some point in the future. And that's it, I suppose. We're going to head off to our Q&A session after this. That's going to post on YouTube on Thursday. If you listen to the podcast as a podcast on an RSS feed, you can also join our YouTube channel, and you'll get these episodes on Thursdays where we talk about a few different questions from the audience, maybe talk about additional questions that they had while watching the live stream, or just questions about Clay's love life. All options are on the table. Thanks very much for listening to our coverage of Scorpion. We'll be back next week with a wrap-up video for the season. We'll see how that goes. It's been so long. And then after that, we'll be back with Scorpion Part 2. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you later.